Having looked at ethical and moral dilemmas, we now come to some other interesting questions and issues that memoirs bring up. These are about memories and the truth. Let's start with looking at the difference between a truth and a fact. You may not have considered this before, but in the context of memoirs and memories, there is a difference. How you remember something happening is truth. How it really occurred without disputation is a fact. And a memoir is a combination of both of these. For example, let's say you recall your first day at school. You remember lining up, even which kids were on either side of you. You remember the teacher who led you into the classroom, and that you sat at the end of the second row. You even recall you had a cheese and salad sandwich and a crispy red apple at lunchtime. Are these facts? No, they're not. Unless there are photos of video footage of these events, they cannot be verified. Indeed, you could track down the kids who you thought were on either side of you, and they may have a different recollection altogether. And maybe the teacher thinks they taught a higher grade that year. But if they also haven't got proof, then your story is true. It's as you remember it. Now, those events are never going to cause a lot of controversy, but as we saw in the previous lesson, if someone's recollection about a serious event is different to yours, you have to consider that through a moral lens. But you have every right to present your truth if the other person is not able to provide evidence that it happened otherwise. In considering facts, sometimes something you have accepted as a fact turns out not to be. For example, we all know facts about our family because we've been told them and or because we have seen the evidence. But it's usually the former, and we accept what we've been told as fact is fact. If you haven't seen your birth certificate, can you be sure you were born on a particular day? How do you really know that your grandfather fought in a war or escaped from Eastern Europe? There are many families that have been rocked by revelations when events that had been accepted as fact were found to be false. Among the most serious have been claims by family members that they fought in particular wars and were even war heroes. Some posed as decorated veterans for decades. Less seriously, and in many cases quite amusingly, I remember many middle-aged and older men suddenly backtracking on their claims that they had played first grade football when an encyclopedia of football was released with the names of every player who had ever played a first grade game of football, even if just one. And suddenly there were many red-faced grandfathers and husbands and fathers who downgraded their claim to a few reserve grade matches. When writing a memoir, it is good practice to try to verify as much information as you can, particularly old family claims. There are many government agencies and other organisations that can provide records going back hundreds of years, whether that be about births, deaths and marriages, land sales, migration records, war service. So here's an exercise for you it's not about disputing what you've been told. I don't want to start any family disputes or uncover dark secrets, but I want you to think about what is required to really prove something happened. Think of something you've been told about a member of your family and document how you would go about proving it beyond doubt. Remember, it's about proving something you have been told. Which agencies or departments may have the details you need? You may want to do this with a few of your facts. Truth is far more fun to play with than facts. Think of when you have studied history. I still remember my high school history teacher who, when I explained that I thought I should love history but didn't, she told me to forget about the facts and to concentrate on the conflict and the characters, and she was right. As soon as I did that, history came to life for me. The dates on which particular events occurred, they might be important, but they're not as interesting as the conflict and the characters that make up history. With so many perspectives and the cliche that the victors write the history, everything other than the dates and the places is pretty much truth rather than fact. If you could get the participants to time travel to today and set them up on a TV panel show, They're all going to have a different version of events. So when you're writing a memoir, put these important dates in there, but then, sticking to the truths. It's the truths that are going to make for a better story. Create a story to end all stories. Memories. According to the writer and scholar Reza Aslan, memories are lies that you've convinced yourself are true. He says, and I quote, "Science shows that every time you recall an event in your past, you actively recreate that event in your brain. You reshape it. You give it details, create new significances. And in doing so, you irrevocably alter the facts of the event, so that often what you remember is far from what actually happened. No wonder that what starts as a fact quickly turns into what we've been calling a truth, as it passes further and further down memory lane." Now, recalling these memories is essential to writing a memoir. The obvious events stick out in your mind, those formative moments and people who have had the most impact on the person that you've become. Yet, as you know, you have thousands, millions of memories in your brain to call on. Here's an exercise that helps to dredge up memories that may not have come up through more rational thought. In my Writing Stories course, I stress the importance of using all your senses in your descriptions. Well, this exercise is about using your senses in other ways to help trigger memories. Try and recall a memory and then describe it by recalling a sense. Do it for each of your senses. For example, recall the smell of coffee or freshly mowed grass and just see what memories it conjures up. Or the sound of a jackhammer or a squeaky door. Or the taste of salt or chili on the tip of your tongue. Or the touch of an icy cold river water or a cashmere jumper. You may find you dredge up memories that would otherwise have remained dormant. And some of these memories may be related to events that will make great stories. So, you have your memories, your truths, whatever you want to call them. Now, you want to make them interesting. Of course, conflict is what drives a story. No conflict, no story. But there is a way to make a story even more compelling, and that is by ensuring it has high stakes. Readers become more and more invested in a story the greater the stakes. In a work of fiction, that's obviously easy to do. You just make things up. For example, I could write a story in which someone breaks into a house that we've already seen is empty. Big deal. But if I had earlier shown an adult couple in the house, when the break-in occurs, the reader is just a little bit more tense because they know there's people in that house. Now, there's even higher stakes if we see someone break into a house in which we know there are a couple of adults, but also 2 young children sleeping. Much higher stakes. Now, I know that's fiction, but it's an example of how a story has greater power when the stakes are higher. So when you are recounting memories, think about how you can raise the stakes. Was there a time limit in which you had to finish something or to find something important? Were other more vulnerable people than you involved? Consider sticking them into the story and their circumstances. Was there something in the lead up that you could add to raise the stakes? And what were the consequences of failure? All of those things help raise the stakes. And the higher the stakes, the better the reading experience. Take a few minutes to write loosely about a memory, maybe one that you conjured up earlier with the senses exercise. Now, use that memory twice, changing the stakes. Write about it where the stakes are low or non-existent. In another, try and create higher stakes, a time limit, consequences, anything you can think of. Maybe they're emotional stakes. This is not necessarily an easy task, but if you manage it now, you will notice a huge difference in how the reader will react to each of them, because you'll be reacting to each of them differently. You'll notice how the high stakes makes it far more interesting. If you find this exercise too hard now, come back to it later in the course. Facts, memories and truth. You know all about them now. We'll be dealing with them again in the lessons to come in different contexts. I hope you're having fun.